Okay, so we are starting a new unit today, so we're all done with unit one stuff. I disabled all of the unit one homeworks because the deadline was actually this past Monday, so don't work on those anymore. They have like hardly any effect on your grade anymore. Those 10-point practices are just checkpoints for each lesson. So they're never really that long. I think on average, each one is about 5 or 6 questions. So it's all just about you doing them. You usually have a practice with every lesson. Again, not that long. There are some teachers that assign like 50 homework questions. Like this one, it'll just take like the 5 or 6 most important ones per lesson. All right. So the only thing that I did not disable, I never disabled the study guides for units, because those are great resources to help you prepare for the study guides are great tools, and the study guides are great tools for the final, plus the study guides are worth way more points than like those 10-point homeworks. So yeah, those are still enabled if those are still missing. If you were planning on remediating your unit one test score, like the most recent one, then those might be great tools to use to prepare for that. So speaking of the unit one test, here are the class averages. And we just did a unit on statistics. So hopefully you all know what these are referring to. My period one on average, the score for the online part was about 80%. For you guys was about 78%. And same with my period four, also about 70%. I also included the standard deviations, which you can see here. And you can kind of compare, everyone was about the same, like all my class periods. And this is the highest, because we've done this curriculum for now 3 years. This is the highest that this test has ever been, like on average. So that's really great. So maybe, I don't know, maybe you guys are smarter, maybe I'm teaching it better after now doing it for, this will be year 3 of this curriculum. Who knows? But really great work. Anytime that my 9th grade algebra students on average score higher than a 60, I usually tend to be pretty happy, like as a class average. But you can compare yourself to the class average. Are you above average? Are you below average? I mean, even if you were like, I don't know, below this is like a high score. So don't feel bad if you bombed the retake just as bad as the first one. I mean, I kept the higher of the 2 scores. You should see in the grade book, that that's the score when it says retake given during class time, higher of 2 scores given. That's when like, okay, that was my higher score. And then you should have also seen what I did to your quizzes from that unit. And it was any quizzes that were lower, I matched the score of your unit one test. So I already did that, unless you're just barely doing the retake today. I already did that. The constructed response, I still need to hand grade. I'm going to take my time with that. The first one I graded like within 24 hours, so that way you could see how you did the very next day on the corrections activity. But this one I can take up to the full 7 days. So everything's graded within 7 days. All right. So you just hang tight so you see that little comment that says retake given during class, higher if you score given. But otherwise, like, grades are looking pretty good right now. The first athlete grade check is next Friday, so September 6th. In order to not be flagged on the grade check, you have to be at least a D in the class. Obviously, you should shoot for higher. But grade checks, I know for my athletes, my freshman athletes, usually are the ones that struggle. Those are the ones that like, you need to make sure your grade is up before that date. They don't tell us what time they pull it, they just tell us the date. So by September 5th, your grade is good, or you get flagged. So yeah, there's that. Should you not like your unit 1 test score even after the retake. I don't want you to just, I don't know, be out of luck. Really, you're only entitled to 1 retake. But what you could do is come during office hours, which for me is Fridays after school until 3. So you can come during office hours and do corrections for half credit backs on the version more recent. So any questions? Okay, great. So we are moving on, unit 2, part 1. So unit 2 is a big unit. So we split it into 2 parts. So there's technically 2 different unit tests for unit 2. Part 1 is all about linear equations and linear systems. Part 2 will be about linear inequalities and systems of inequalities. But today we're kind of just doing a prerequisite skill for unit 2. And that's solving 1 and 2 step equations. This, out of all the lessons, will probably be the most direct. Like if you've noticed in like the last unit, our curriculum likes to use a lot of real world examples, a lot of activities, and it still does. Just a lot of these skills, I don't know how else to explain it, are like direct skills, like just follow the steps. So if by the end of the lesson, you don't know how to achieve like one of these bullet points, that's where you can come to tutoring and ask for help and say, hey, I really don't understand how to isolate a variable. Or I don't know what properties of equality are. Or I can't identify a solution to an equation as a value of a variable that makes it true. Because a lot of the time students will just show up to tutoring and say, I don't know, I just need to get my grade up. I'm like, okay, great, like, do you have a time for that? What do you want me to do? Like, you guys know your tests are what make or break your grade. Do you want to retake the test? Are you ready to retake the test? Do you need help? Like, what do you need help on? All right, be a better learner by really using these as like a checkbox for are you needing the skills or not. You guys know I record every day, most often in this class, so should you ever be absent, know you're gonna be absent ahead of time, it's usually there ahead of time. The practice this time is on paper, as you can see, you have 2, they look kind of similar, but the practice says evens or odds on it. You guys know what that means? You do either all the evens or all the odds. You don't just do half of it. For some reason, people think that that's what that means, or that that's okay somehow. Notice that as you work down the page, they tend to get harder. So you need to do the evens or the odds. You need to. You cannot just like slice the page this way and be like, oh, well, I did 9 from this. Okay, so there's that. Evens or odds, your choice. On Tuesday, I'll show you the key, like I'll project it. You could correct it if you want, but I'll also check it on Tuesday, the one time during class, and should you not get full points, you just upload it to Schoology. So there's that. Yeah, we are going to take notes. If you can't trust yourself to not lose your homework between now and Tuesday when I check it, just take a picture and upload it to Schoology. There is a link in there. This will probably be the last time I remind you about your unit 1 binder check, but we are moving on. There is a date in Schoology, like if you didn't get full points or you didn't turn it in at all, for when the last time you submitted is. So anytime I'm not teaching, you could ask me to check your binder. I will, and then I'll update the score. But you need to have all the pages again because I don't memorize what each person will miss. Here's the schedule for our unit 2, part 1. Quizzes, assessments, they're all posted way in advance. Sometimes they change, but I'm a really big planner, so I don't foresee them changing. Your next assessment won't be till next Friday. And it'll just be a quiz. So quizzes, hopefully, like, you know now, they pale in comparison to the unit tests. Of course, it was kind of hard when the quizzes were the only 2 things in the grade books, but now they're not. You know that these are checkpoints that you should view how you did probably the day after you take it. You can view it, do corrections, and then move on with your life. Stop stressing about it, bringing down your grade, because that unit 2 part 1 test, if you do better on it, I will match the score. Okay. But yeah, there's that. Moving on to the notes now. I know a lot of talk. So we are focusing today on 1 and 2 step equations. And now some of you might be like, oh my God, this is so easy. Why are we doing this? If you don't know how to do this, it makes the rest of the unit very hard. Okay, so we're gonna like really thoroughly go over this, maybe make sure we don't have any misconceptions. And then we are going to, I don't know, do the practice. So it'll be a nice, easy lesson, but if you have questions, you let us know. So this is like where we start actually doing algebra. The first unit was mostly vocabulary and conceptual stuff. This is actually algebra, where we're trying to figure out what value of m plus 12 equals 10. And you can probably just think about it. Like think about what plus 12 equals 10. All right, Wade, what plus 12 equals 10? -2, right? Sometimes they are that easy. Where you can just guess and check is what we call it, when you don't actually do the math. So yeah, that is the guess and check method where you just kind of think about, well, what plus 12 would equal 10? And then you say m equals 10. The other, because you know, it's not always going to be this easy. There will be more steps, there will be more variables eventually. So you have to know your inverse operation. In order to isolate a variable to get it alone, you have to undo what's being done. So what is the opposite of adding 12? Subtracting 12. And it's a rule that in order to keep it equal, whatever you do on one side, you have to do to the other side of the equal sign. We do it here on the left to cancel it out. Sorry, my pen's like a little bit off. I might just have to record a different class, but we'll see. But we do it on this side to cancel it out. We don't normally write m plus 0, we would just write m. And then 10 minus 12, you can put that in your calculator if you don't like negatives, is -2. So if it's not that easy to guess, that you do your inverse operation, undoing it again. Another thing that I'm kind of incorporating that you need to know because you will be assessed on it are your properties of equality. So anytime you have to do something on both sides of the equal sign, like this time I had to subtract, that's called a property of equality. And there's 4. This one would be the subtraction property of equality. If you can like point to it, write it down in your notes, you will be assessed on what property of equality. So friendly reminder, you guys, you pick up your papers yourself. You take your notes yourself. Why you wouldn't take notes, I don't know. That's 20% of your grade right there, and it involves no skill. And then you just save it for your finer check later. All right, now let's look at 2. Look at what is happening to the G. So class, what's happening to the G? It's being subtracted by 9. What's opposite of subtracting 9? Adding 9. So that's what I'm going to do. And whatever you do on one side of the equal sign. So on the left side, -2 plus 9 is a +7. On the right, -9 plus 9 is 0. So the G is alone. We found our answer. G is equal to 9. Table 2, can you tell me what property of equality we just did? What did we do on both sides of the equal sign? All right, just look at the screen, table 2. What did we do on both sides of the equal sign? So this property of equality is the addition property of equality. So whatever you're doing on both sides to keep it equal, that's a property of equality that you need to be able to identify. Or be able to tell me if it's wrong, if it's like mislabeled or something. Good. So now table 3, can you tell me what is going on in number 3 between -7 and y? Like what operation is implied? Multiplication. So if you didn't know that, now you know. Whenever it's a number smushed up against to a letter, it's implying multiplication. So then class, what's opposite of multiplying? So that's what I'm gonna do. Whatever I do on one side of the equal sign. Finish it, finish that sentence. You have to do to the other side in order to complete. You really could do whatever you want to both sides and it'll keep it equal. But this way we are isolating the y. Because what happens when you have the same thing on top and bottom of a fraction? What's -7 divided by -7? Not 0. 1. So it cancels out to 1. And then 1 times y is just y. So now the y is alone. Simplify on the right side. Use a calculator if you need to. What's -91 divided by -7? Even I used a calculator earlier. So just do it, practice it. 13. Positive 13 is correct. Questions? Okay. So let's try to like pick up, like, I feel like we're waiting a little too long on these responses. It's really repetitive. Okay, repetition's the mother of all learning. Table 4, can you tell me what property of equality was used here? Division property of equality, good. Because we divided on each side. Okay, great. Now in number 4, table 5, can you tell me what that 9 or like what's happening number 4 with the variable? Right now it's being divided by 9. So fraction bars mean division. Class, what's opposite of dividing by 9? And that's what I'm gonna do on both sides to make it cancel. Don't do an X anymore for multiplication. It'll get too confusing. Just either use parentheses, use a dot. But to undo dividing by 9, I would have to multiply by 9. I get A equals -4 times 9 is positive or negative. Okay, good. And what you should be able to do is plug your variable back in. So if I'm saying A is -36, I should be able to plug it back in and get a statement that's yours. -36 divided by 9 is -1. Good? Yeah. You don't know how to use your calculator, you're getting an error, make sure you calculate. For the longest time, I didn't know that like with negatives, you have to press like a special button. So my calculator kept telling me the wrong answer. So. Table 6, what property of equality did we do in this one? The multiplication property of equality. Alright, my pen is like not aligned, so I have to do it from back there. But the multiplication property of equality is what we just did. So when you do something on both sides to keep it equal, that's a property of equality. What you had to do is the name of it, okay? Moving on, any questions? Do we understand that these variable values make the equation true when we plug them back in? Okay. So those are one-step equations. Highly doubt you'll have a one-step equation on your test, but you will have properties of equality, which all of these are different. So that's good to go over. Briefly, let's talk about fractions. I know a lot of you will see a fraction and skip it. You can't do that. There will be fractions on your test. You can't just take an L on a question on your test. For example, like, you know, that 100-point portion you took? If you just completely give up on a question and get it wrong, that's -10, right? Because if it's out of 100 points and there's 10 questions, each one is worth 10 points. So don't just skip up. And luckily, if you know how to use a calculator, you can bypass a lot of the fraction rules, but we'll still review them. I'll show you two ways. So table 7, can you tell me what operation is going on here between the 2/3 and the x? Right now it's multiplying. Class, what's opposite of multiplying? So that's what I'm going to show you first. It looks a little ugly, but bear with me. When you have the same thing on top and bottom of a fraction, what happens? It cancels out, becomes 1. So that cancels out on the left to where I have the x alone. On the right, you could do like your keep, change, flip rule, your copy dot flip, whatever you would call it. But I'm just going to use a calculator. That's what I prefer. And after that, I would recommend. So we're doing 10 divided by 2/3. It's good practice with whatever calculator you plan to use that anytime there's a fraction, you put that fraction in parentheses. Sometimes it makes a difference, sometimes it doesn't, but it's a good practice for later on. So 10 divided by 2/3 is 15. My answer for this. Questions on that? Now, if you were doing or are familiar with keep, change, flip, that fraction rule, that's the one that tells you to, whenever you're dividing fractions, to keep the first one. So in this one, I'd keep the 10. I'll still write it as a fraction, 10/1. Change the division to multiplication and flip the second fraction. You could multiply straight across. You could use your calculator for that part. But what's 10 times 3? What's 1 times 2? 30 divided by 2 is same answer. And if I were to put it in my calculator, 10 times 3/2 is still 15. So yes, 10 divided by 2/3 or 10 times 3/2 is 15. Don't mix that up. Stick with one or the other. Questions on that? What do you call the flipped fraction? I think I heard it. Can we say it louder? What do we call a flipped fraction? Reciprocal. So that's what this is saying to do over here. But both ways work if you know how to use the calculator, especially. So to get rid of a fraction, you can multiply by the reciprocal. So like, let's look at number 7. What is the reciprocal of -6/5? Table 8, can you tell me what's the reciprocal of -6/5? Yes. All right, guys, I need you to be checked in. This is gonna be a really long lesson if we're not paying attention until we're called on. We just talked about what a reciprocal is. So class, what's the reciprocal of -6/5? Just 5? 5 over -6, or you could put the negative in the numerator, it doesn't matter. Whatever you do on one side. So this is me multiplying by the reciprocal, which we already said is the same as dividing by not the reciprocal. But that will cancel out this fraction over here. I get the K alone. And then I would prefer you just use your calculator for this part versus simplifying or whatever, but up to you. We're doing 12 times -5 over 6. Same difference if you put the negative in the denominator. Your answer for that one should be -10. So just dividing the -6 over 5 on each side should give you the same answer. Whatever you prefer to do is up to you. Good. All right, you guys try 6 and 8 then, the both of them. We'll go over it shortly. Table 1. What is going on between the W and the 4 9s? What operation? Right now it's multiplying. By a fraction. So there's 2 ways you could get rid of that fraction to make it cancel. Table 2, how can I make the 4 9s cancel? By multiplying by the reciprocal is one of the ways that I told you is acceptable. So let's do that then. Table 3, what's the reciprocal of 4 9? 9/4. And so multiplying it on this side makes it cancel. Whatever I do on one side, I have to do to the other. So now the W is isolated. I just have to simplify on the right. And I would highly recommend, yeah, you could cross simplify and stuff, but just use a calculator, it's quicker and probably less likely to make a mistake, so long as you know how to use it. So I have -8 times 9 over 4. All right, so my answer is -8. The other way you could have done it is divided 4 9s on each side, but in that way you do not flip it. So whatever you prefer, but if you did it right, your answer would be -8. Good, any questions? Okay. Table 4, you're on deck, so give me 1 second, because my pen is acting up. Okay, so table 4, how would you like to isolate the M in this one? And what is the reciprocal? Okay, good. Side note, if you guys didn't know, whenever there's a negative in a fraction, it doesn't really matter which side you put it on. I think it's good practice to leave it in the top, but up to you. I don't really care. Over here, this will cancel out. I just get the M. And then over here, I would highly recommend you use your calculator. Table 5, what is the final answer of this one? What's -9 times 2? And then what's -18 divided by -1? Okay, good. Again, I highly recommend use a calculator. That's what I would do, but it is possible to do it by hand too. But that's our answer.
positive 18 for that one. Good. Don't skip fractions. Calculators can bypass a lot of those fraction rules, so you just do that. All right, now again, one-step equations are easier because they're one step. In the future, you will probably have multiple steps. Right now, we're just gonna look at two. This has some steps, but I don't really like these steps that much. I feel like they only work some of the time. Most of the time, you would get rid of any addition, subtraction first, and then you would get rid of any multiplication or division. But I like this way, actually, where you always, when isolating a variable, so I would write this down. When isolating a variable, get rid of what is farther from that variable, farthest from the variable first. This way of thinking, I think, leaves the least amount of room for error. I've never really seen it be wrong. I've just seen kids like not really know what is technically farther. So that's when isolating a variable, get rid of what is farthest from the variable first, like physically farthest. So table 6, in number 9, what's farther from the variable, the 6 or the 8? Right? The 8, like physically, what is farthest? The 6 is pushed right up against it, the 8 is separated by a symbol. That's where you do your inverse operations. So class, what's opposite of adding 8? Whatever you do on one side of the equal sign. Good. And then I'm not going to be finished after this step because I still have something with the variable, but you just kind of simplify as you go. What's 15 minus 8? All right, now class, look at what's happening to the variable. It's being multiplied by 6. Table 7, what's opposite of multiplying by 6? So we're gonna do that. And because we did it on one side, you have to do it to the other side if we're gonna keep it equal. And class, what's 42 divided by 6? 7. Use a calculator if you need to for that part, but yeah, that's a 7. What you should be able to do is plug that variable back in and it's true. So like 7 times 6 is 42, 42 plus 8 is 50. But this is easier to do, I think, than just guessing it. So that's why I'm going to show you how to solve even if before you can discuss it. What else about that? Be able to identify your properties of equality. So table 8, what property of equality did we do in the first step? Thanks, not table 8, but I'll take it. This one's subtraction property of equality. And table 8, can you tell me this property of equality? Division property of equality. Okay. I'm gonna give you one to try. You think we're ready to try? Actually, let's do one more together. Let's do 12 together. So look at what's going on in number 12. And the rule is to get rid of what is physically farther from that variable first. So table 1, what is farther from the y? The 7 or the 3? Good. Class, think about how to make that 7 cancel. What would I have to do? Subtract 7. If you thought adding 7, you have to think what makes it cancel, what makes it 0. I want it to be like 0 minus 3y so that I don't have to write the 0. Adding 7 would make it 14. That doesn't help me. Whatever you do to one side. Great. I have a negative 3y equals 34 minus 7 is good. All right. Table 2, what is the opposite of multiplying by negative 3? And we're going to do that on each side. Cancels out on the left. On the right, we just need to simplify. What's my final answer going to be? -9. Good. I'm going to give you a couple to try, and they're on the back, obviously, but I'll leave these on the front so you could see. I believe it was 13 and 16. Let me double check that I wanted you to try. Actually, 13 and 17. So other two-step equations, always start with what's farther from the variable and you're isolating. I'll give you like 2 minutes to try those. Okay, so for 13, your final answer should have been 32. You have, like, the order matters when you isolate. You have to start with what is physically the farthest from what you're trying to isolate. This is in a fraction with the 2, so the 7 is technically farther. Opposite of subtracting 7 would be adding 7. 7 plus 9 is 16. Over here, opposite of dividing by 2 is multiplying by 2. Again, you should be able to plug this back in and see that you're right. So like 32 divided by 2 is 16. 16 minus 7 is 9. Good, got it. Questions? Okay, scrolling, hopefully you're just correcting it and not copying it all from scratch. Okay, 17. What's physically farther from the P?
Yeah.
So the negative 38, we're not really caring about because it's not on the same side as the P. We want to get the P alone. So yeah, start with what's farther from the P. That would be the negative 10. I'd have to add a 10 on both sides to cancel it. I get on the right side, negative 28. How do I get rid of the 7/4? There's 2 right answers. Kristen? Okay, multiply by the reciprocal. What is the reciprocal? Whatever you do on one side, do to the other. I would recommend using a calculator at that step. If you use a calculator, I don't have my key on me, so I'm just gonna have to do it really quickly. Negative 28 times 4/7. Negative 16 is correct. Good. Any questions? Okay, one more little thing I need to show you. I know it's long, sorry, but just one more little thing. This is where I told you I like the way of thinking of it as start with what's farther from the variable. Because like in problems set up like these, you would have to get rid of the 8 first before the 11, and that goes against those steps that were typed out on your paper. So just always think what's farther from the variable and then undo that first. So what's farthest is the 8 because it's not on the same side as the 11, or like as a variable. What's opposite of multiplying, or sorry, what's opposite of dividing by 8? Whatever you go on one side. You do to the other side. Anytime you multiply a fraction, listen, by its denominator, that's really important.
you basically make it not a fraction anymore. So multiply the fraction by the denominator, it's no longer a fraction. I have x plus 11 equal to what's negative 3 times 8? Negative 24. Now what's opposite of adding 11? Subtracting 11. And my final answer is good. Earlier, I think people were saying 13 or negative 13. Use your calculator. That's totally fine. But it is negative 35. Okay, this will be our last U try. And then you're just working on your practice evens or odds. But do try this one first, please. I'll project the answer in about a minute. Okay, so always start with what's farther from the variable. In 20, that would be the negative 2, because it's not on the same side of the fraction. The negative 2, or sorry, the negative 5 is. So you have to cancel the negative 2 first by undoing what's being done. That's our inverse operation. Remember, the fraction bar means to divide, so opposite of dividing negative 2 is multiplying by negative, which is what I'm showing here. Okay, parentheses imply multiplication. Don't use an X anymore for that. But yeah, multiply negative 2 on each side, that gets it to just be n minus 5, no longer a fraction. Over here, negative 7 times negative 2 is positive 14. And then all we have to do is cancel out subtracting 5 by adding 5. Because you wouldn't write n plus 0. Right? Whatever you do on one side, you do to the other. Simplify, that's how we get that n is 19. That's what would make it this true if I plug it back in. All right, that's it. That's all for the lesson. So you have 8 minutes to do evens or odds on your practice. Your choice, up to you. I'll have the key on Tuesday available for you to see if you practiced it right. On Tuesday, I'll be checking for work shown and completion. So just have answers, that doesn't count. Show work. So just do it all in your head. And if you can't trust yourself to not lose your practice between now and when I check it on Tuesday, take a picture and upload it to Schoology when it's done.